Well, Britain is bracing for a weekend of protests as the use of hotels to house asylum seekers continues to split opinion.
Yes, dozens of demonstrations are planned. It's after a High Court judge ordered the removal of migrants from a hotel in Epping.
Now, further hotels in Chichester, in Connolly, in Wakefield and Tamworth expected to be the main flashpoints as local communities seek to have migrants relocated.
Well, anti-racism groups are coordinating counter-protests with some warning that this could lead to the worst unrest since last summer's riots.
Theo Wishwood is in the studio. Theo's a political commentator. Theo, what do you think? How do you think this is going to shape up this weekend?
I think it's going to be a very busy weekend for the police. We can expect protests, as you say. We've got them planned today and on Saturday. And I think it's important that people's voices are heard. There's justified concern out there. I'm sure much of it is voiced by your viewers on GBNews at GBNews. But I think it's important that it remains peaceful. And I think these counter-protests, you can tell exactly why they're doing it. They're doing it to wind up those who want to express concerns about what's going on in their community in the hope that it turns violent and then they can turn around and go, look, it's the far right.
Yeah,
and I think it's important that people, if you've got a protest, that you can go, you protest, you do so peacefully. And therefore, if you do that, then I think you maintain credibility.
And it is the counter-protests and actually the police response to those counter-protests that seemed to be the point of tension in Epping.
Yes.
And the only time when things were thrown was at that point, when you actually saw the protesters come together.
Yeah, and the police, they provided an escort to these counter-protests. They came down from the station, the police escorted them down from the station, and then things, bubbled over. But people do have... we've seen the figures, 110,000 applications in the last 12 months that came out, that the problem is increasing under this government and people are feeling it in their communities. It's a live criminal proceedings now, but what triggered what happened in Epping wasn't disinformation or the like. It was a serious allegation of a sexual assault, which is now, finding its way through the criminal justice system. But I think it's important that people have the right to go out and make their voices heard, but they've got to do so peacefully.
Yeah, the Epping ruling, of course, has put a lot of wind in the sails of so many people around the country, but it won't necessarily apply to them. I think people think coming out on the streets and saying, yeah, we object to this one behind us here as well, and that will change things, not necessarily.
Well, British law works on precedent, Eamon, and it was a significant ruling in Epping by the High Court. It's going to be very difficult to see how the government, it may well decide, the Home Office may well decide to challenge that ruling. They did oppose the High Court judge's decision in that particular case, but politically to go and to the Court of Appeal and ask for that ruling to be overturned, I think would be politically damaging for Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper. And you're not just seeing reform councils, there are now 10 councils controlled by reform, but as the newspapers reported in the last 24 hours, other councils, including Labour councils, are now so worried about this particular problem that they're looking at what happened at Epping. And what the Epping judgment means is that if a council, say in Altrincham, or a council in another Tamworth you mentioned, if they go to the High Court and they say, hang on a moment, we've got a hotel in our community and we don't want it there because it's causing tensions, and the High Court judge goes, well, I'm really sorry, I don't think so, I think you're just going to have to lump it. Actually, they can now turn around and say, but what happened? This is a breach of planning regulations. Look what the judge said in the Epping case, and this means that the government's going to have to really think again about how it tackles this problem. Is it going to look at camps, like it's being proposed by Reform and the Conservative Party, or are they going to look at a much riskier option in terms of HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy? We saw what happened, what's happened up in Ballymena in Northern Ireland a few weeks ago, and it's got a real challenge now as to what the Home Office does next.
And it's a practical challenge as well.
It is a practical challenge. The thing is,
they haven't got time.
And what do you do with the people who are in the hotels?
Yeah, and it's just a matter of weeks for Epping. I think they've got to be out by the first week of September.
Yeah.
So it will be HMOs, won't it? Or social housing, which is then what British people need. So that'll be a whole other set of...
It will force up rents potentially. Landlords will think suddenly, this is a real way of making some money very quickly. And it will force up rents right across the board. But it's also much... I went up to the Bell Hotel in Epping, and it is not secure accommodation, but it is contained. This is a hotel which has a steel fence around it. If you are policing a protest there, it is actually a relatively simple police operation for the police, to keep everybody apart and to keep the thing safe. If you've got people dotted around the community in HMOs, that's much tougher. And it's also much tougher for the police, if there is a serious allegation, like what happened up in Epping, to get to the bottom of who may well be responsible if it turns out that the allegation is against somebody who's claiming asylum in this country, because they don't know exactly where everybody is all the time.
And it's harder for the community to know where these people are as well.
There was a case down in Portsmouth where you had 22 HMOs which had been bought up, housing multiple occupancy, bought up by the Home Office, and they hadn't, never mind telling the community, they hadn't even told the council. And they bought up these HMOs and placed migrants in HMOs. And that just fuels the tension, because people are looking at their street or looking at their neighbourhood, and they're seeing these changes, but they're not being told about why they're happening, why they're necessary, and that just creates more tension.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private Internet Access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GBNews discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GBnews to start protecting yourself digitally today.
Theo, Lucy Connolly, she's on the front of most of the papers today. Quite a quiet release yesterday, even though it appears everybody could have plotted this right down to the last day. I mean, she did the minimum term of her sentence, 9 months out of whatever it was, 31 months. What do you think is going to happen to her next? I mean, she is married to a counsellor.
Yeah, and I saw the comments about her return home and the fact that from prison, the fact she shied away from the cameras. And her husband said they just want to try and rebuild their lives. 377 days in prison for anybody is a long time. She's got kids. She's got to try and rebuild her life now. I'm sure people want to do a sit-down interview with Lucy Connolly to get her story. I think what was particularly difficult, toxic even for the government in this particular case was at the same time as releasing to try and alleviate tension in the prison, capacity issues in the prison system, releasing people who'd committed really serious offences. Here we had the government come down and say, well, we need to jail Lucy Connolly, or not the government, the judge in this case, jailing Lucy Connolly for 31 months, which is a long stretch in prison. And the two became this, she became a cause célèbre because people were looking at, people would look at it and say, hang on a moment, you're releasing people who had committed serious offences, and at the same time, with Lucy Connolly, she's been jailed. And of course, the argument from the government was, we need to set an example, and Lucy Connolly was the example, by ensuring that judges send people to prison for a long time so that we can stop the riots. And if you've got the US, US administration, the Trump administration, J.D. Vance, I can't remember him naming Lucy Connolly by, particularly, but they were looking at this case. They were very concerned about what they saw as a clampdown on freedom of expression. Yes. And that, of course, given the importance of the US relationship to this country at the moment, what's going on in Ukraine, trade deals, Liberation Day from Donald Trump, this is... It is not been a simplistic. It's not been an easy case for Starmer.
I know you say there she is an example. She also could be a focal point for the people who are protesting this weekend, because this is what she was talking about over a year ago, and there it is. Whether she has a profile in this again or not, she would say one would expect not, but. There's so many people. They're not printing it. They're not putting their stuff on social media, but they're thinking what she said.
Yeah, look, the first thing to say is there were abhorrent comments, and she directed her ire at the migrants who were in this country, and what particular there was obviously a lot of disinformation about what happened up in the north of England at Southport. But I think it's important just that people. Whatever is spread on social media, whatever they read on social media, if you stay within the confines of the law, then there's going to be a general election at some point, and most law people in this country are law-abiding people, and they look at rioting and they think that's not something we want to be part of. This is something we've watched Nigel Farage in the polls. He's surged to 30%. He needs to go beyond 30%. And if people are saying, well, there needs to be, we've had the Tories, we've had Labour, neither of those parties have been able to solve the problem, and we need to find somebody else who can. And Nigel Farage is putting his hand up and saying that he's that person. He can't do that piggybacking off violent protests. Yeah. That way leads to electoral oblivion. It won't happen for him. He needs to maintain credibility. He needs to be able to point to these cases and the numbers that came out yesterday and what we've seen up and down the country and say there's a problem and he's going to deal with it. But if he is associated, or reform is associated with violence in our communities, that's no path to power.
Charlie, we've got a big weekend, maybe a dangerous weekend, but certainly a busy weekend of protests about migrants in hotels.
Absolutely, and this has been bubbling for some time. Obviously, earlier on in the week, we had the judgment on Epping Forest Hotel there, the Bell Hotel, that was deemed now not usable for asylum seekers and people that are being housed, or refugees being housed there. Local authorities and people up and down the country are now going to either appeal that decision, but protests are mounting. If you follow on the back of the Epping saga, yesterday's figures, over 111,000 people had applied for asylum in this country, the highest on record. That has sparked, I think, a lot of fear in people, a lot of protests, a lot of anger, and that's why we're now seeing over 27
I get that, but Scarlett, then I look at that, it took 111,000 people. Where do you put these people who are in the hotels?
Well, that's what I was going to say. It is obviously a serious problem. It's obvious that people don't like the hotels being taken over, but I'm not sure what the option is. I'm sure a lot of hotel owners like it a great deal.
It's very lucrative, isn't it?
Very, very lucrative, and keeps bad hotels going. But I think we do have to look at the options. But I was trying to work them out. So the some reform police commissioner said, or mayor said, well, put them in tents. Where? And surely we...
People certainly won't like that in their towns and villages, will
precisely.
they?
I just think wherever you put them, because it's a problem, and what we've done is that actually what people are saying is we don't we don't like the system, which is fine. But actually, it must be really scary being a migrant, being an asylum seeker in one of these hotels.
Yeah, but I think this is the point, and I don't think people have really picked up on this. Nobody has a problem, I don't think, of putting people in hotels if you're an asylum seeker, if you're genuinely seeking refuge.
Yeah.
But the people that we're seeing coming over in the small boats, these are men. These are young men who are, I think, quite capable of probably being back in their own country. People who throw their passports over the small boat to get into the country, they then have to spend weeks and months, if not 2 years, in a hotel. Years. That is the problem. So I think if you are genuinely seeking asylum, of course people will look after you in the UK. That's part of our DNA. But when you're taking the country for a ride, which a lot of these people are, that's when you need to be
Hold on,
deported.
there are a lot of men who are... I mean, I have somebody living with me at the moment who's a refugee from the Yemen, and I said, but why can't you go back? And he said, I'll be killed. You know, it's really simple.
But that's the Yemen.
There are some genuine asylum seekers, and there are economic migrants.
And actually what they're trying to do is to send the migrants back, and they have closed 200 hotels. Look, I think there's a real problem, right? I mean, and actually what we've got to understand is that over half of people seeking asylum fly in. Right, is that actually, if you're rich enough, you can buy a visa and you fly in, and then you think. But the problem is they are here. What are we going to do? I mean, the first thing, which I have been saying on this programme for years, is we've got to be able to process them within weeks. At the moment, we're talking years.
Yeah.